Trump set to unveil a huge arms deal with Saudi Arabia during his first trip abroad, which he is in the throes of as we speak here. The two sides agreed on a weapons package for tanks, fighter jets, warships. This package totaling more than $100 billion. In conjunction with the administration's America First platform, the deal is expected to boost U.S. manufacturing jobs. Despite possible economic benefits there, it's receiving some criticism, widespread in fact, from both sides of the political aisle. All of this happening while the president's business ties in the Middle East continue to complicate his diplomatic outreach.
Here to discuss all of this with us is CNN global economic analyst and columnist for the Financial Times, Rana Foroohar. Morning, Rana.
Morning. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. Let's talk about this deal. This is one of those things that you get to, the administration would like to have out there right away, because it's a win. You know, you're not even on the ground, and you're already pushing a $100 billion deal here. and that's probably the max. I've heard some say it goes up to maybe $300 billion, but my point is, should we really be so overwhelmed with what a wonderful deal?
Well, let's put this in a little bit of historical context. The U.S. has been doing big business deals with Saudi Arabia for some time now. In fact, Donald Trump is really in some ways just taking that relationship back to the status quo. President Obama had actually been trying to kind of orchestrate a little bit of a pivot away from Saudi Arabia being our main ally in the region along with Israel. He had been trying to warm relationships with Iran. Donald Trump is really just going back to business as usual, trying to do as much as he can in terms of arms deals, but also healthcare, IT, private equity. The largest Saudi state oil company, Saudi Aramco, is looking to go public. So there's going to be executives from the banking community, from the New York Stock Exchange going on this trip to try and close those deals. And I think for Donald Trump, this is really about resetting the idea that he is a pro-business president. There's been a lot of complaints in recent weeks and months from the business community about when are we going to get this pro-business agenda. So being able to go to Saudi Arabia, close a lot of deals, even if they're just on paper, is a big win for him.
And no doubt there's going to be a touting of jobs that would either be created or reinforced as a result. But there are usually deals, or in these deals, a kind of explanation that Saudi Arabia would also be making some of these armaments because they want to get more and more into that business in their own country, right?
Absolutely, and it's also important to remember that a lot of times when the president has announced deals and then said, look how many jobs I've created, these are already jobs that are in the pipeline, and it's important to remember that U.S. manufacturing, regardless of what deals get signed in Saudi Arabia, is not going back to its glory days. A lot of the jobs, even that will be coming to the U.S. are going to be done by robots, going to be done by software. There's a lot of disruption in manufacturing, so one trip to the Middle East is not going to solve this problem by any means.
And then the pushback that we've talked about to this deal is the fact that Saudi Arabia is, of course, embroiled in a war in Yemen right next door, and there has been criticism as to the lack of concern for civilian casualties. So that's, part of the problem here is that the U.S. looks like it's arming an ally that is doing harm to civilians.
Absolutely, and if you remember last year, former President Obama had actually pulled back on $400 million worth of arms deals to the Saudis because of those concerns about civilian casualties. This also draws the point again that the Saudis and Iran are on very different sides of almost every conflict in the Middle East. The conflict in Yemen, the conflict in Syria. This is going to be very interesting, doing more business with Saudi Arabia, this being the president's first trip, in terms of what that signals to Iran about the U.S. position and its relationship with the U.S. going forward.
And can I ask you real quick, we remember President Obama, he made a trip to Egypt when he wanted to sort of send a message to the Muslim world. Of course, Donald Trump goes to Saudi Arabia. What do you think will be the difference in the message?
Well, it's interesting because, the Obama was trying to say, look, we support the Arab Spring, we support reform in the Middle East. We're not going to get more involved in Middle Eastern affairs, but we are supporting this reform. President Trump is really saying, look, we're supporting the status quo. The Saudi relationship is problematic because the Wahhabi strain of Islam in Saudi Arabia has actually been associated, with the rise of terrorist groups, with the sort of ideology behind a number of terrorist groups. So this is not a clean and easy relationship. And it certainly brings into question, how committed the president is to business versus fighting radical Islamic terrorism.
Right. They're intertwined, but in a very awkward kind of way.
Yeah.
CNN economic analyst and Financial Times columnist Rana Foroohar, thank you very much.